I'm a researcher in human origins and antiquity. Although my ideas are quite controversial, I presented them at some of the leading scientific institutions in the world, such as the Royal Institution in London, the Russian Academy of Sciences in Moscow, many other national academies of science. And I've also had the honor of presenting these ideas at hundreds of universities around the world, and I'm very honored to be here today in Dubai to speak to you. Not everyone likes what I have to say. If there's one thing that could make you more suspicious in America than becoming a commentator on Al Jazeera, it would be declaring that you have some doubts about the theory of evolution. I can attest to that. So the question I'd like to deal with in my remarks is, how old is the human species? And today, the most common answer to that question comes from the modern followers of Charles Darwin. And they tell us that the first human beings like us came into existence about 150,000 years ago, perhaps a few years more. And before that, there would have been only more primitive, ape-like human ancestors. I don't really accept this idea, and one reason I don't accept it is there's physical evidence that contradicts it. And I've documented that evidence in this book, Forbidden Archaeology, co-authored with Richard Thompson. It's about 900 pages long, therefore some people call it forbidding archaeology. It's a very heavy book in more ways than one. So we made the book available in a shorter, popular edition called The Hidden History of the Human Race. And I'm told these books are available somewhere in Dubai, like Bookworld. Now the evidence that I talk about in these works is not very well known because of what I call a process of knowledge filtration that operates in the world of science. We could call that little blue box the knowledge filter, and it represents the dominant consensus among scientists today about this question of human origins. And reports of evidence that conform to this consensus will pass through this intellectual filter very easily, which means that students will read about this evidence in their textbooks. People will see scientists talking about it on television specials. And if they go to the local museum, they will see these discoveries. But if we have evidence, reports of evidence that radically contradict the dominant ideas, they tend to be filtered out. Not as a result of some conspiracy to suppress truth, but the people who are doing the filtering are honestly believing they are doing a proper job, but I don't necessarily agree with that. I'm going to give a few examples of the kind of evidence that I'm talking about. This is Virginia Steve McIntyre. She's an American geologist who I know personally, and when she was just beginning her career as a young PhD, she was involved in dating an archaeological site in Mexico. The site is called Hueyatlaco. It's in central Mexico. This is the excavation there. And the archaeologists uncovered many stone tools and artifacts, and of course they wanted to know how old they were, so they called the team of geologists to the site to give them the age of the site. So Virginia Steen McIntyre and her colleagues used 4 scientific methods to date the site. They used the zircon fission track method, they used the potassium argon method, they used 4 different methods to date this site, and they came up with an age of 250,000 years. But the archaeologists said, we can't accept that, that's impossible. According to their theories, human beings capable of making the artifacts did not exist anywhere in the world 250,000 years ago because they hadn't evolved yet. So they refused to publish the age or the site given by their own hand-picked team of geologists. So Virginia Steen McIntyre and her colleagues decided to independently publish the age or the site. But when they did that, there was an extreme negative backlash from their colleagues. And she was really quite surprised. She wrote to the editor of the journal that published the paper, not being an anthropologist, I didn't realize how deeply woven into our thought the current theory of human evolution has become. Our work at Waialaco has been rejected by most archaeologists because it contradicts that theory, period. In 1979, Mary Leakey discovered footprints, dozens of them, at a place called Lake Tole in the country of Tanzania in East Africa. The footprints were found in layers of solidified volcanic ash dated by the potassium-argon method as being about 3,700,000 years old. In her original report, Mary Leakey said that these footprints are indistinguishable from modern human footprints. And other scientists also agreed. Paleontologist Tim White said, make no mistake about it, they are like modern human footprints. Now, neither Tim White nor Mary Leakey believe that humans like us were present almost 4 million years ago to make those footprints. So how did they explain the footprints? Well, they proposed there must have existed at that time in Africa some kind of ape man who had feet exactly like modern human feet, and that's how the footprints were made. That's an interesting proposal. However, there is no physical evidence to support it. We have the skeletons of the ape men who existed at that time. They're called Australopithecus. And we have foot bones from those creatures. And they are not like the foot bones of a modern human being. They're quite ape-like with very, very long toes. Actually, the only creature known to science today that has a foot exactly like a modern human foot is a human being like ourselves. So what did Mary Leakey actually find? I believe she found evidence for a human presence in Africa going back about 4 million years. Now, some might say, well, footprints are one type of evidence. It would be better if you had human skeletons that age. And such things do exist. In the 19th century, an Italian geologist named Giuseppe Ragazzoni found several human skeletons at a place called Castanedolo in northern Italy. He found them in formations about 4 million years old, and they were anatomically modern. This is the skull from one of them. I went to Castanedolo, and I found this gentleman there, and from him I obtained a very rare geological report giving the details of the discovery, and from that we were able to relocate the place where the discovery was made, and it should be possible to do more research there. Now, when some scientists hear that a human skeleton has been found in some very ancient layer of rock, they say, look, there's no mystery about this. It's very easy to explain. Maybe 4,000 years ago, someone died on the surface. Then his friends dug a grave and put the skeleton into the very ancient layer of rock, and that's the explanation. Now, in this case, Ragazzoni, being a professional geologist, was very much aware of this possibility. And he said in his original report that if the skeletons had been buried, then the layers of rock above the skeleton would have been disturbed, as we see here. But he looked very carefully when he was taking the skeletons out of the ground, and he said all the layers of rock above the skeletons were intact and undisturbed, as we see here, which means the skeletons really are as old as the layers of rock in which they were found, in this case about 4 million years. Now, a case that's always fascinated me is the California gold mine discoveries. In the 19th century, gold was discovered in California. To get the gold, miners were digging tunnels into the sides of mountains, like Table Mountain in the Sierra Nevada mountains of California. And deep inside these tunnels, in the solid rock, the miners were finding human skeletons and human artifacts, many stone tools and weapons. For example, they found many of these stone mortars and pestles. And these are the sorts of things that archaeologists tell us can only be made by humans of our level of intelligence. Now, what I find very interesting is that the human bones and human artifacts were found in layers of solid rock that belong to the early part of the geological period called the Eocene, which means these would be about 50 million years old. These discoveries were reported to the scientific world by Dr. J.D. Whitney, who was the chief government geologist of California. His report was published by Harvard University. However, we don't hear very much about these discoveries today because of the process of knowledge filtration. This is the anthropologist William Holmes, who worked at the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, and he wrote, if Dr. Whitney had understood the theory of human evolution, he would not have published that report. In other words, he would have understood that humans could not have existed so far in the past. So if the facts did not support the theory, then the facts should not be reported. Now, I had my own experience of the knowledge filtering process in connection with these California gold mine discoveries a few years ago. I was a consultant for a television special called The Mysterious Origins of Man that was shown on NBC, the largest American television network at the time. It was hosted by Charlton Heston, a famous American actor. Many Americans consider his word to be as good as the word of God. The producer of the show, Bill Cote, had read my book, Forbidden Archaeology, and he wanted to include some of the cases from the book in the show. So he got in touch with me, and I told him he should go to the Museum of Anthropology at the University of California at Berkeley, because I knew that some of the artifacts from the California gold mines are still in the collection of that museum. However, the museum official would not let him see or film the artifacts. However, we were able to find some photographs that were taken by Dr. Whitney in the 19th century, so he did have some images to show in his documentary. It was interesting what happened when this show aired in the United States. A group of scientists tried to stop NBC from showing the program. They weren't successful, and this made them quite angry. So they went to the Federal Communications Commission, which is the agency of the United States government that licenses and regulates the television broadcasting industry. And they wanted the government to investigate NBC, censure NBC. They wanted the government to force NBC to broadcast primetime apologies. And they also wanted the government to fine NBC millions of dollars for having aired this program. Now, I'm happy to say the government didn't do that, but I found it interesting that these sorts of attempts were made. Now, a couple of years ago, I went back to the museum myself. I'm a member of the World Archaeological Congress, which is the world's largest international organization of archaeologists, and I had submitted a proposal to present a paper at a conference organized by the World Archaeological Congress about these California gold mine discoveries, and the proposal was accepted. So I was able to go to the museum directors and show them that my proposal to present a paper about these discoveries had been accepted for presentation at a major international conference. So they gave me permission to study and photograph the artifacts. They're not kept in the museum itself. They're kept in a storage building several miles from the museum, but they are still there, and these are some of the very ancient human artifacts from the California gold mines. Now, by studying Dr. Whitney's original maps and field notes, I was able to go out into the mountains of California. This is Table Mountain as it looks today, and we were able to relocate some of the old gold mining tunnels where these objects were originally discovered. And it should be possible to do more research there. Now, how far back in time can we go with evidence like this? In the year 1862, a scientific journal called The Geologist published an interesting report. An anatomically modern human skeleton was found 90 feet, about 30 meters below the surface of the ground in the state of Illinois in America. And according to the report, above the skeleton was a thick layer of slate rock, several feet thick, that was unbroken. That's an important detail because the usual counter-explanation is that somehow or other the skeleton came down from some higher, more recent level. But the fact that this thick layer of slate rock was unbroken rules out that particular counter-explanation. And modern geologists of the state of Illinois tell us that this layer here, where the skeleton was found, is about 300 million years old. This report from Scientific American tells of a beautiful metallic base that was found 15 feet deep in solid rock near Boston in the town of Dorchester in the United States. According to geologists of the United States Geological Survey, the age of the layers of rock in which the object was found, at that place, at that depth, are about 600 million years. Now, miners in South Africa have found many of these very interesting spherical objects. They're made of hematite, which is a naturally occurring type of iron ore. They're about 1 or 2 inches in diameter. They are found solidly embedded in mineral deposits about 2 billion years old. The most interesting feature is the parallel grooves that go around the center of each object. These were shown in the NBC television special, and before NBC agreed to show them, they said, you have to submit these to an independent company of metallurgists for analysis. And that was done, and the metallurgists reported they could not explain how these objects could have formed naturally in the layers of the earth, especially the grooves that go around the center of each object. So that means they had to have been intelligently made. But as I said, they're found solidly embedded in mineral deposits over 2 billion years old. Now, I could keep you here for many weeks, going through one case after another, because there are hundreds of these cases reported in the scientific literature of the past 150 to 200 years. So what I conclude from all of this is that our anatomically modern human species is actually many millions of years old and did not evolve from ancient ape-like creatures. Rather, the picture is one of coexistence. Yes, there were different types of ape men. Yes, there were ancient apes and monkeys. But alongside them coexisted human beings like us. That's the conclusion I draw from this. It's not a very widely accepted or very popular conclusion at this point, but that's how I see it. So, thank you very much for your kind attention.